Right. 14, consideration of policy for public use of the city council chambers.
All right.
Go.
I'll be quick. Honorable Mayor and City Council, the item before you this evening is on the agenda by request of the council to consider a policy for the use of the council chambers. Many cities with community rooms or public facilities have policies providing non-city public use of the rooms. As such, cities prioritize the use of these facilities for city and government purposes prior to making them available to other groups if they're allowed at all. The council chambers currently do not have a policy governing the use of the space, and it's in the city's interest to have rules and regulations about who, when, and how the council chambers can be used, so there's no questions, arbitrary decisions, or inappropriate uses of the council chambers. Before you is a draft policy for your consideration, and that completes my report.
Thank you, Lauren.
Well done.
Thank you. Questions for Lauren?
No.
No?
Have
Okay.
we
Yes?
have we charged a fee for usage by outside groups?
Not currently for the use of the chambers.
Okay, but it looks like what's proposed as far as the request form is $200 per usage, or is that something else?
For a deposit, correct?
Or
Yes.
yeah,
It's a cleaning
For
deposit.
cleaning.
That would be
yeah.
refunded, assuming everything is left as it was.
we haven't required a cleaning deposit in the past.
We do require for some of our special events, we require a $75 cleaning deposit, but not for use of the chambers.
And I believe that the draft we prepared also includes a reference to whatever there might be a fee based on what's in the schedule of fees and charges. At such time, there is a fee put into the schedule of fees and charges. There is not one now.
Who opens and closes the room when somebody uses it?
It depends. If there's nobody around, it'll be the police department. Will come in.
I assumed that, but just,
That's right. There's occasion that I don't live too far away that I actually come back and do it myself and stick around before people arrive to open it. But if everything fails, it's always back to the police department.
Okay. No other questions? Okay, I have Mr. Harbison, followed by Ms. Myers. So my only 2 cards.
Well, we have a few minutes before midnight here before Cinderella turns into a coach. Honorable Mayor and City Council members, I think it's good to set a policy to ensure that the facility is made available to the public to promote community engagement, interaction, and be fair to all who would like to use the chambers. Unfortunately, this proposed document in the staff report is flawed in several important ways that should be addressed before a policy is adapted. I have 6 points. The first, the Section 2 describes the types of organizations allowed. The criteria must be objective and not subjective, not subject to interpretation. For instance, being a 501c3 is an objective criteria. However, the reference to nonpartisan is problematic because it allows the city manager and the city council, to the extent they get involved, with discretion to deny access if an organization has or is alleged to have points of view that are different from the city government. We live in a democracy that protects the right of free speech, and the city cannot be perceived to be screening out points of view that are different from their own. I believe their policy that screens out equal access to groups with different points of view is a constitutional issue. Second point is Section 5 is unnecessary unless it's used as a for instance. Any organizations that can meet the final criteria in Section 2 should be allowed, even if they are not on the list in Section 5. There are existing organizations such as the MCHA and the LBHOA that have hosted events in council chambers before, but they're missing from the list. Is this because the author of the policy has decided that they are partisan, perhaps because they've supported certain ballot initiatives? For those listed, such as League of Women's Voters, each year they put out recommendations on various state ballot initiatives. Does that mean the League is partisan? And if so, what they listed? Finally, organizations evolve and may meet the criteria at one point, but not in the future, and new organizations are formed. So it shouldn't be engraved in stone as to who was on the list, but just the criteria. The third point is Section 3 needs some work. It lists the types of events that will not be allowed. In particular, it forbids election-related activities such as candidate forums or debates. How is the public interest served by this obvious change in practice, since many forums have been held in council chambers before? Why would the city council want to pass a new policy that contributes to a less informed electorate? Fourth, Section 4A says the city's technology and technology infrastructure is not available for use. Does that include the microphones and the sound system, the lights? Those things would render the rooms really meaningless for most meetings. The fifth is it says no use of the dais. Why? The two forums this past week were less effective because the tables are down here, the people couldn't see the candidates. We asked the city manager and Lauren for an explanation of that somewhat arbitrary decision, and we got no answer. And then the last point is the Section 10 limits the use to regular business hours to 8 to 5. Why is this a change in practice? Many public service meetings need to happen in the evening because people are working during the day. Again, how is the public served by this restriction? I hope you consider these things and make the amendments to the policy to make it a more appropriate policy.
Thank you, Mr. Harbison. Ms. Myers?
The city's proposed policy states that the League of Women Voters is in a very short list of eligible parties to use the chambers, the only one that's external to the city. The League site says our members are passionate activists, and they support a variety of progressive positions, including campaign finance reform, universal health, abortion rights, climate change, environmental regulation, and gun control. Merriam-Webster defines nonpartisan as free from party affiliation, bias, or designation. So the League self-identifies as progressive and exclusively supports progressive causes. But remember, Merriam-Webster defines it as nonpartisan as free from party affiliations or designation. Progressivism is a designation of an affiliation with the Democratic Party. Why is your policy advocating special treatment of public resources for a progressive organization? How does this represent the interests of a diverse community that you are supposed to represent? A better representation of our diverse residents would be to restrict use for nonpartisan activities. Recently, we had 2 forums, equitably executed by PVRG and the League for their forums. Neither were partisan events. Both filled the chambers with standing room only and appreciated by the residents. Please note that PVRG site activities endorse neither conservative or progressive stances, but rather inclusively embrace values we all hold dear, such as the truth, transparency, ethics, equitable representation, and principled management of public resources. PVRG is a diverse board of multiple parties, which is representative of our community because they are our community. They live here. PVRG fulfills the accurate description of nonpartisan. You just don't like them. And that's no way to govern. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Okay. Any questions, comments?
I know for other events where we have outside groups coming in, we always require them to have insurance, and I didn't see anything about that in this.
It's in there.
Is it? I must have just
There's
missed
no
it.
number, though. I was gonna
What
bring that up.
paragraph?
And 11, stating organizations must provide proof of insurance and an endorsement naming the city as additional insured according to city standards. It's towards the end of that paragraph.
I'm sorry, I totally missed that. Thank you.
We should put a number in the,
Yeah, maybe. It is a different
Right.
requirement than assume full responsibility.
It may be a little silly, but I was concerned about the no food in the chambers. I think we do that from time to time, don't we?
We do. And it's at your discretion whether you want to include something like that in here or not.
we're going to
It
charge
doesn't.
a deposit for a cleaning fee, then I don't see why they can't bring food as long as they keep it clean.
Okay.
Can I ask the city attorney a really super wonky question?
Super wonky.
Yeah, going back to
Yeah,
the, yeah,
She likes those.
going back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it talks about public accommodations. Is the use of this facility a public accommodation that would prevent any discrimination on the basis of those 5 protected factors: race, religion, color, national origin, or gender?
No, it's not a public accommodation under that act, but under the state law anyways, we can't discriminate on those bases. And I don't think we do, but we cannot.
Okay, but why is this not
Well, it's
considered a public accommodation?
because It's not like a restaurant or a hotel or where you're inviting the public out. This is actually like more like a place of business. So that it doesn't become, it's not a general public forum. So you could use this building only for city business, for example. We're not compelled to make it available to the public at all. But you can, of course, because it's, people's city hall too. But it doesn't,
Okay. So we're not, we wouldn't be, if we wanted to have a policy of only the city-appointed committees and the city council can meet here, it can be that restrictive?
yes.
Okay.
And anyone.
city
can come to
organizations.
Those meetings.
Hmm?
I mean, and anyone.
Of course.
Can come to
Right.
those meetings, right, regardless of race, sex.
Yeah,
religious
of course.
affiliation,
Right. Okay.
If you're gonna go down that route, I would also include, the Homes Association use this chamber for their meetings, correct? But then any of our organizations,
Yeah.
our volunteer groups.
So we could just limit it to city-affiliated organizations.
That's a possibility. I'm actually on the other end, so
Okay.
You're actually on the,
I think,
Let it all come
I
in?
think we, I'm actually quite liberal or open with this. I think this is obviously our city hall. I think that the primacy of the city meetings, so city council meetings and the committee and the commission meetings, I think those need to take priority in terms of timing and scheduling. But other than that, I'm open to people renting this facility for a fee.
See, I have to disagree. I think the idea of only city-related groups makes sense because it's clean. There's no question of favoritism. I think a few of the items, 2A, when a question arises regarding the eligibility of any groups to use the council chambers, the city manager I would not make it up to the city manager. I would suggest the verbiage be that the city manager will consult with the city council liaison, which we will establish, can be the mayor pro tem, to make the final decision. I don't think that's a decision that the city manager should be alone with, because I don't think he has the pulse of what's going on in our community. Number 5, I think we need to delete the League of Women Voters because it's the opposite of what we say earlier in the statement. So League of Women Voters will no longer be able to use our chambers because it's not open to elections groups anymore. Number 7, which is about deposits. Let me just get back to the site. Reservation of the council must make at least 14 business days in advance, but no more than 3 months in advance, while initial contact may be made by phone. And by the way, this document was established as a result of the compilation and it's a hybrid of many, many cities. It's astonishing that our city never, ever had a policy for use of these chambers. This is not a community hall. We have libraries, we have all sorts of halls here, not the city council. We took down the city council seal because to have the city council seal on film, it gives the impression that the city council has something to do with the debate, and that is not the case. So in number 7 again, the only thing I would add is that the person has to bring in the documentation of insurance at least 14 days in advance of the reservation date in person. And we need to get the identification of that person and see if there's any, if it's just city, it doesn't matter. Number 11, and our city attorney, we need a minimum dollar amount on the insurance. So you work with a lot of cities, I'm sure some of them have this.
I'm sure JPIA will have a recommendation for.
Okay.
And I can just add, we left it open so it would meet city standards, because that could change over time. But we're happy to provide
Okay.
that, and we have that information.
And the last thing I'd like to say is the last one. The city reserves the right, consistent with this policy, to refuse or revoke permission to use the council chambers. And the only thing I would add is at any time prior to or during the event, if conditions arise that require such action. Because things can change during an event. And I think the city needs to protect itself, and I'm very, very in line with the idea of making this for city and homeowners association use only. I think the League of Women Voters will find another place. I think PVRRG will find another place. And use of the city hall somehow implies some kind of city involvement. And I don't think that's appropriate. And I want to point out that this was put on the agenda because of the leadership of our mayor. There's a lot of talk at these forums about leadership, but to lead is a verb, and it's an action verb, which means you have to do something to lead. You can't just talk the talk. Everybody talks the talk, but you have to actually walk the walk.
Let's talk about this.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm probably somewhere in between. I recognize that I do think City Hall comes with a sort of auspice of city authorization, and so I'm not sure it should be open to every group, although on the other hand, if we do get rid of the pews, we're going to have this
Right.
great space that could be used for a lot of different types of things. And so that's where I'm sort of a little torn between that. What I would like, instead of the whole favorable consideration and all that, maybe just a hierarchy of priority shall be given to city-affiliated groups, other governmental agencies, nonprofit organizations, then going to, resident groups that are, I don't know, homeowners associations, and then, but, so.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, as well as Councilmember Davidson's point about taking down the seal lest there appear to be any sort of endorsement or sponsorship. I understand that. I think some sort of prioritization or tiered structure makes a lot of
Right,
sense.
so we're not sort of considering, I don't know that we need to micromanage with one of us every time somebody asks to use this.
Right.
That makes sense to me. But I do agree with Councilmember Davidson. I think we should eliminate all the partisan electioneering goes on here, because there is that sense that it's sponsored by the city and it's not. So I agree with you. The PPRG and the League of Women Voters can find other venues.
See,
Let's keep it for real community events and for city business.
I think it gets into, the problem I have with that is I think there's enough gray areas with a lot of these organizations where it's not altogether clear whether there is some public or community benefit to it. So I don't think that we should be in a position where we're trying to parse those grays. It just seems like it would be too difficult.
And I agree with that. We're either going to be much more restrictive and keep it only for Homes Association and PV Estates business, the city business, or then it's more of a free-for-all. I don't think there's really any way in between that you're going to not be subjective of something. So we need to decide if we're going to be restrictive or if we're going to just free-for-all. And what would free-for-all mean? Do we charge? Do we, make it a profitable thing, or do we, increase the deposit? I think that's the really two ways to go. To me, there's not really in between.
Well, I think the way it's been since 1991, if we follow your suggestion, we're back to not even requiring a document because it doesn't stipulate anything whatsoever. Because we've had no requirements whatsoever.
No, I meant if it's city business, if it's our commissions and committees and our organizations, PV Cares and whatnot, then that's just the restriction that we put on. Those are the only organizations that can come in here. If we're not, if it's going to be something else, then we would require the insurance and the deposits and all that stuff, the whole 9 yards. But we have to decide. To me, this is more of a black and white than a gray area. I think the gray area becomes, there's too much decisions to be made. And it could become, partial or somebody's playing favorites or whatnot. So I don't want to get into that gray area.
So what would your take be on that?
I'd say city business.
I agree.
Cleaner.
It is cleaner. I just don't think that, I think that if we're going to start looking at these various organizations, we really need to be content and mission neutral. Otherwise, I think it's just too difficult with those gray organizations. So I feel like we kind of have to go one extreme or
Okay.
the
Right,
other.
right.
Well,
I think that's what Betty.
Yeah, that's
I think
what
we're all
I'm
kind
saying.
of coming to
Yeah.
that conclusion. And I guess I come down on the city business side too as well. I mean, this is where we do our business. And to let other groups come in here and sort of be under that mantle, League of Women Voters or anybody else, maybe we just shouldn't do that.
Okay, so how do we define, so this would be to the exclusion of the LBHOA, MCHA. I'm assuming it would include if the concessions wanted to meet here because they are
When's
city
the last time a
concessions.
concession met here?
I'm sorry?
When is the last time a concession met here?
I don't know if they have.
And they have
I'm
their
just,
facilities.
They have their own facilities. I'm not too worried about that. And then,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
previously mentioned, we do have the library that seems to be utilized for a lot of these community events. The only time that any concession came over here was when we had to do the conflict resolution for the tennis club that we were involved. So,
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it seems like it's got to be
it has to
one
be
extreme or the
extremes,
other,
yeah.
yeah.
So, again, mindful of the hour.
Mm-hmm.
We can come back and
this
redraft
keep
this.
you awake?
That's a much more narrowly focused policy that you can then consider and discuss further,
Mm-hmm.
based on the consensus, the
Tony,
majority.
I think we have a majority here.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll bring it
Yeah,
back. We'll
right.
still bring it back, rewritten, defining city business, pretty much
Fine.
to commissions and council business.
Right.
Well, are we going to include, we have Neighborhood Watch and DDP and PV Cares, are they all included?
I would
Which I-
say,
I
because
would
they're
say-
all
I would
part
say yes.
city.
That's
Yes,
our
they're all
city,
part
those are
city.
city sponsored.
City-sponsored
That-
programs.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
They're part of the PD, they're part, yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll rewrite it to incorporate that and bring it back for your discussion.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you.